Good afternoon, morning, according to the place where you are now. Welcome to this roundtable on semiotics and memory. Gracias a todas y todas por estar aquí en este meeting. Today I will speak in English because my Spanish is not that good. And thank you all for being here, and thank you all the people behind this organization, the organization of these important semiotic meetings that can give us the opportunity to discuss important topics on the contemporary agenda of semiotic studies. In particular, I'd like to thank Professor Neyla Pardo and Bianca Suárez-Perez for the idea of this meeting, but also for the perfect organization. I am Mario Panico. I am postdoctoral fellow at University of Bologna and member of TRAME, the Research Center on Cultural Memory and Cultural Trauma at University of Bologna again. And with me today, there are Professor Marisol Cardenas and Dr. Federico Bellentani, and together we will discuss an important field in the general semiotics and cultural semiotics in particular, which is memory. Before entering the core of our table, we decided to have 10-15 minutes per presentation and then a Q&A session. I would like just to say a few words about the goal of this table today. For some time now, research in the field of philosophy and semiotics have rediscovered an interest in the mechanisms of memory and forgetting, albeit with different epistemological presupposition. If in the case of philosophy, memory is understood as an internal faculty and capacity that have a role also in regulating emotions, for the point of view of semiotics, or at least from the perspective of cultural semiotics, memory is externalized. In other words, memory is translated and mediated in text, which are useful for recognizing how specific past is remembered and with what specific purposes. This textual specificity refers to a consolidated tradition that is of the semiotics of culture by Yuri Lotman and the Tartu Moscow School, linked to the study of forms of self-representation, modeling, and preservation of social groups, precisely through the theoretical and empirical investigation of semiotic subjects. As Cristina de Maria has written in one of her books on semiotics and memory, if there is a specific semiotic relevance to the question of memory, it lies in the investigation that concerns the textualization of identities, and now I'm quoting her, to identify the process of moralization of a nation, or to investigate the rituals through which the temporalities of social actors are synchronized, discriminating between what is past and consequently establishing what is present and therefore what will be the future. End of quote. After this short introduction, now I will open our table. With the semiotic team, we decided to give this structure to the seminar. Every speaker will have 10-15 minutes to present its own research, opening problems and topic for the discussion, and then we can have 10 minutes more or less at the end for the Q&A session and doubts. The first paper, if you are okay, Federico and Marisol, is by Professor Marisol. It's okay for you to start, or you want to be the second? It's okay for you?
Okay, it's possible.
Okay. Yes, I present briefly your academic profile, and then you can start sharing the screen. Professor Marisol Cardenas Ognate. She's a transdisciplinary intercultural researcher, specialist in gender studies, from intersectionality of ancestral pueblos, origination as indigenous and diachronic and as Afro-descendant. She works on sense studies, emotional argumentation, semiotics of image, decoloniality, territories, and urban imaginaries. Among some of her publications, I'd like to remember Interculturality, Aesthetics, and Artisanal Practices, and Rituals, Aesthetics, Blankets, and Alter Creative Semiosphere, Women in History of Ecuador. Thank you very much, Marisol, for being here, and the virtual floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Condos. Thank you. I am very happy to stay here. And also I want to tell thank you to Neyla Pardo for her invitation. Gracias con todos. Yo voy a compartirles en este momento 3 dimensiones de mi trabajo de investigación desde la semiótica y mi experiencia como profesora de este campo. La primera, a través de 3 puntadas, retomando mi trabajo con el campo de la artesanía. Una primera puntada en donde voy a compartir algo de mi subjetividad con este tema a partir de la creación de vínculo con la estética ritual diaspórica, que es una de las categorías que yo voy a presentar y que voy a desarrollarle como segundo punto. Y finalmente espero poder aplicarlo a un tipo de investigación que estoy trabajando actualmente con mujeres afrodescendientes del norte de Ecuador y del sur de Colombia. Una puntada histórica a la estética ritual diaspórica en mi memoria. Desde mi formación en la carrera de Historia del Arte, me interesé en las estéticas populares y en particular las expresiones complejas de creatividad, especialmente en el arte ritual comunitario. Las culturas ancestrales como las africanas y afrodescendientes encuentran en la ritualidad un campo semiótico rico en sentidos, significados e interpretaciones. Recuerdo que trabajé vinculada justamente al arte popular en el último año de mi carrera, como alumna ayudante de esta materia en la Universidad de La Habana. Y este vínculo con la imagen ancestral, con su etos barroco, pensando, por ejemplo, en toda esta profusión tan grande que tiene la artesanía, la polifonía colorística y su puesta en escena, ¿no? A manera de un carnaval, genera toda una presencia disruptora del canon estético normativizado. Así me interesé en este campo de las estéticas alternativas y tomando en cuenta la perspectiva semiótica. Asumí que el acceso a estos discursos artísticos implicaban adentrarse en el conocimiento profundo de sus prácticas creativas y, por tanto, necesitaba entrar en las comunidades. Así caminé la raíz de los principios de orden, disposición, cosmovisión particulares, para lo cual, por ejemplo, revistas de teoría del arte y semiótica como criterios del recordado amigo Desiderio Navarro, fueron claves en este proceso de formación académica y también como profesora. Estudiar las formas del sentipensamiento de estas culturas, sus sujetos diversos y subjetividades, transitando el eje espiral de contextos creativos colectivos, que también son personales, pero desde procesos semióticos, me llevó a la exploración de 4 enclaves fundamentales del arte: el etos, la ética, la estética y, por supuesto, la erótica, tomando sobre todo en cuenta la propuesta de Audre Lorde, ¿no? La política del conocimiento basada en la pasionalidad como eje creativo de cualquier práctica y no solamente la genitalidad, por supuesto. Entonces, en este sentido, articulo estas transdimensiones políticas, críticas y cognitivas. Esta inmersión me permitió acceder al diapasón de miradas situadas en la antropología del arte y descubrir los ejercicios hegemónicos heteronormativos coloniales, así como sus contrapunteos insurgentes, resilientes, que agencian modos de crítica, resistencia y sobre todo presencia desde sus diversas de cognición complejas, expresadas localizadamente, por supuesto, interseccional, corporizadas desde las múltiples cosmopercepciones de belleza de sus pueblos. En mis estudios de posgrado me interesé por el simbolismo y después visité y me hospedé en los estudios de la semiótica de la cultura de Lodman, la semiótica cognitiva prisciana, visual, gestual de la imagen y sobre todo en la semiótica metafórica desde el grupo Mu, los estudios de la representación y el imaginario, Castoriadis, y por supuesto en la semiótica del arte calabrese. El campo de los sentidos, los signos, los códigos, tienen desarrollados múltiples modelos de análisis que he ido tejiendo desde diversas matrices Y desde este campo de investigación vengo articulando una propuesta transversal ubicada en la epistemología inter y transdisciplinaria que la denomino estéticas rituales diaspóricas. Grosso modo, podría decir que las formas de expresión cultural del pluriverso de lo sensible posee una cualidad de auto y heterorepresentación, ya sea escenográfica, matérica, objetual o no, textual, intercontextual, que migra de sujetos, agencias, significaciones, y es a través de esta que la estética se actualiza, renueva, potencializa o legitima, es decir, se hace posible. Así entran y salen en la frontera estética dialógica varias condiciones en disputa, poder, explosión o emergencia de sentidos de acuerdo al tiempo, los sujetos y la historia, es decir, las condiciones sociales de producción discursiva de estas materialidades, donde transitan normas, valores y funciones estéticas, Mukarovsky, es decir, que la ritualidad, entendida en sentido semiótico metafórico, funciona como un filtro de memoria, acción y proyección que tiene como cualidad paradójica, a veces inclusive oxímoron, creativo, el instante de la muerte que genera vida, pero siempre implica dinamismo. La ritualidad funciona entonces en esta segundidad pirsianamente hablando, es decir, en el campo del objeto, la indexicalización es a través de sus dispositivos inteligentes, autogenerativos, móviles y por tanto en potencia diaspórica que se genera la movilidad sistémica que goza de buena salud. Son las posibilidades de argumentación, traducción de semióticas y de lógicas alternativas a la racionalidad estética occidental, como la lógica emotiva, corporal, espiritual, presentes en las sabidurías ancestrales, que se encuentran nuevas retóricas, funcionalidades, resignificaciones políticas, donde la estética del colonial, o como prefiero llamar la decolonialidad estética, ha abierto una brecha alternativa para entender los diversos mundos de lo sensible. Recordemos, por ejemplo, también a Boris Bernstein, quien acuñó la categoría de etnoestética, ¿no?, en el siglo pasado, y a través del cual se subraya este rasgo de pertinencia cultural de lo sensible al contexto sociohistórico específico. Bueno, voy a pasar por el tema del tiempo a la presentación de un ejemplo de una aplicación de esta propuesta en un tipo de arte popular, creativo y político que estoy dando. Compartir pantalla. ¿Me avisas, Mario, si está? ¿Se ve?
No, actually, we can't see your screen. So maybe you can try again.
Oh, ok. Compartir pantalla. Yes, I am. Yes. ¿Sí?
Not yet.
¿Se está viendo ya?
No. Another thing that we can do, you can send me the presentation and then I can try to share the screen.
Ok. Entonces, bueno, voy a a ver si es que poder presentar. Creo que...
Okay, I think she left accidentally the meeting. And Federico, if you are okay, meanwhile, Professor Marisol is trying to enter again in the link, we can start with your presentation because so we can continue our discussion. Maybe later, after your presentation, Professor Marisol can continue her paper. I will briefly present you your academic profile. Federico Bellentani is a researcher. His interests lie at the intersection between semiotics and geography. He investigates the way in which urban landscapes convey meanings and how these are interpreted by different audiences. His research she's back, I think. No, sorry. His research focuses on the post-Soviet countries with a focus on Estonia. He received his PhD from School of Geography and Planning at Cardiff University in UK, and I want to also quote the title of his last book, The Meaning of the Built Environment, a Semiotic and Geographical Approach to Monuments in Post-Soviet Era for the Greuter. Thank you, Federico. You have 10, 15 minutes more or less.
Thank you, Mario.
You can talk.
Thank you, Mario. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. As Mario said, thank you for your presentation, and thank you very much for the organization of this important event. As Mario said, I'm Federico Bellentani, and my research focuses on the semiotics of the built environment in general and on monuments and memorial in particular. Especially, I look at controversial monuments, which are monuments that are considered by a part of the population as controversial, as bringing outdated cultural value, and that their presence in the public space has become controversial. I think that semiotics can prove useful in exploring the controversies, the conflicts of memory and identity that are behind historical narratives, and in turn their material dimension in monuments and memorial. My research starts from an assumption that monuments have both commemorative and political function. They define a unit for national memory, educated citizens toward what to remember and what to forget of the past. They define a unit for national identity, shaping a given community basic value and sentiment of national distinctiveness. They thus inculcate a particular historical narrative that are specific conception of what to remember of the past, so to say what we are now in the present and what kind of future we would like to have in respect to this. And all this define also some political agendas, legitimizing and reproducing the political power of those that have the monument erected. National elites are in particular aware of the power of monument and use them to educate citizens toward the kinds of ideals they want them to strive toward. They create a sort of discourse of the past, as Professor Patrizia Violi would say, and if there is a discourse or there is some authors that can be, for example, national elites, local national government, local government, regional government, Department of Heritage, and so on and so forth, can create this discourse for certain purpose and to convey certain meaning and historical narratives. On the other hand, there are readers that differently interpret this discourse, each one having its own particular way to frame social reality based on its cultural traits, political views, socio-economical interests, as well as contingent needs. So individuals can interpret and use monuments in ways that are different from what the elite expected, or that they might have even never envisioned. Until there is a sort of a paradox. While monuments are meant to be stable over time in their physical form, their meaning are very dynamic. They change, reflecting changes in culture, social relation, concept of nation, and view of the past. Some of them become controversial, which means that for a part of the population that is more or less large amount of the population, they can represent outdated cultural values or reflect the ideology of a bygone regime, And for this reason, their permanence in the public space has become problematic for this part of the population. Now I particularly look at strategies for dealing with the controversial monuments on an institutional point of view and on a bottom-up point of view. And I think that semiotics, as said before, can be really useful to analyze the multiple controversial meaning and interpretation of monuments memorial, thus providing certain kind of solution to how to deal with them. At the institutional level, during my fieldwork from 2015 to 2016 in post-Soviet countries, specifically in Estonia, I did identified 9 institutional cases of cultural invention of monuments memorial. Of course, those are analytical categories, and some monuments may have fallen into one or more of these. They goes from leaving the monuments as it stand to the complete destruction of the monument. So they are increasingly going toward from leaving it, from not touching it, to destroying the materiality of the monument. In the middle, between the first and the ninth, there is some other reinvention from different conservation and renovation practices when monuments become part of the cultural heritage, manipulating the surroundings in order to hide the visibility and possibly the logical weight of the monuments, adding or removing elements to change the materiality and thus the meaning of the monument, again turning monument into something completely different using the materiality of the monument, erecting other built forms in order to hide again the visibility of the monument, or removing or relocating somewhere else the monument, or removing it and putting it in somewhere else outside the glaze of the citizens of, or the visitor, the users, until the total destruction of the materiality of the monuments. Today I'm going particularly into the bottom-up reinvention. So if those were institutional reinvention, then there are grassroots movements that use monument in order to convey their own views on history and on the past. And this has, there are some examples. For example, the spontaneous excision, the destruction of monuments, as for example happened in post-socialist and post-Soviet country in 1990s, 1991, when many Soviet monuments were removed with hammer or other tools spontaneously by the population, or the spontaneous excision due to political protest, for example, as it happens to the Edward Conso statue in Bristol during the Black Lives Matter movement protests, and desecrating the monument with paste, as it happened, for example, the in England, or covering, as it happens to many Confederate monuments, in order to hide the visibility of the monuments. And there's also some creative and playful reinvention, which are interesting. So people can use the space of the monuments to try out their tricks of biking and skating. They can use digital technology in order to augment or change the meaning of the monument, as for example, during the Black Lives Matter movement, the pedestal of Confederate monuments was used with the projector to project some heroes of the monuments, or changing the with graffiti and public art, as it happens in Sofia. Mario Panico has written an interesting article about it, where Soviet army statue were turned into pop culture characters, or even playing and mocking with certain kind of irony or tools. So all these reinvention are there to refashion and reinvent the cultural meanings of monuments, and they all provide a certain kind of discourse of the past to deal with the historical meanings and interpretation that are embedded in the monument, and also to change it whenever it gets to controversial. And semiotics, together with some ethnographical methodologies, can be really useful to go in depth in the meaning and interpretation of monuments and memorials, and in turn of the historical narratives that they represent, and in the way they configure certain kind of social dynamics of inclusion and exclusion. All this idea come, as Mario said, from my book that was published this year, The Meaning of the Built Environment, and I thank you very much now for your attention.
Thank you very much, Federico, also for being very precise with time. Now we can continue with the presentation of Marisol, because before we were interrupted because of maybe some connection problems. And Marisol, I didn't receive your presentation, actually. Did you send me? I can't hear you, sorry. Maybe your mic is off. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Federico, can you confirm? Now we can.
I prefer to finish my presentation after you. I have time to.
Of course,
check
will be perfect.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I'm going to share my screen now. I hope it works. I just ask you confirmation of the fact that you can see my screen.
We cannot, Mario.
Maybe it needs some time. Because they said that they are sharing my screen, actually. So let me try again. Can you see now?
No.
Okay.
So you did click share
yes,
screen?
Of course. Yes, of course. The fact is that on my screen, they are saying that StreamYard is sharing your screen. So that's strange.
If you want to send it to me, Mario, I can share it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We have to do it like that because
when you do click share screen, and then you click also on the entire screen.
Okay, now
it's free click if you're more comfortable.
I'm sending you the presentation and then I will try again. So share screen.
And then you have to click it on the sul quadrato. Esatto.
Now can you see?
Now we can see, yes.
Okay, thank you, Federico, for... I'm opening the presentation again. Can you see space for nostalgia?
Unfortunately not. We see your screen, but it's just the... I think it's better to share the entire screen. So share screen and then entire screen, then you click it on the entire screen and you can do it. Otherwise, I can do it without any problem.
I send you did you receive my presentation?
To what email?
Gmail.
Unfortunately not, probably because it's a bit heavy, so maybe it's coming, but here we are.
Okay. Then I'll send you the Marisol's presentation so you can share also her presentation.
Did you send me a OneDrive link?
Yeah, because it's huge.
Okay. You don't have it on like PDF or Google presentation?
No, because I think it's too big.
Because in this case, I have to access it and I have... Sorry, we're going to talk in Italian one second. Non riesco a fare il sign in al Microsoft account perché non ce l'ho io personale, c'è quello della Bologna Business School e diventa un problema.
Ok.
Questo sei tu. Se tu adesso metti la presentazione lì non viene fuori niente?
Se io metto la presentazione, tu cosa vedi?
Io sto continuando a vedere il tuo
schermo tipo...
Esatto, perché dovresti... Tu hai fatto... prova...
Dimmi.
Allora, share screen,
Sì.
entire screen...
Perché faccio anche finestra in realtà e ce l'ho la presentazione, però quando la apro poi non me la lascia qui, non me la fa vedere. Ah, now yes.
Eccoci.
You can see the presentation. So if I move, you can see the slide moving.
Yes.
Ah, thank God.
You can go now.
Okay. Sorry for this technical problem, but we were moved to another platform. We were thinking that was Zoom, our platform, but okay. I will just spend 10 minutes in this my presentation that is connected to a little part of a broader research that I did during my PhD, connected to the role that emotion can have in space of memory that are connected in a way to trauma, cultural trauma, like for example, fascism for Italy. As you can see here from the cover of this slide, there is a neo-fascist activist doing a parade in a particular kind of place. I will show you in the detail what it is. That is Predappio, birthplace of Benito Mussolini, that today is problematic, using an euphemism, place where there are some neo-fascist practices there. So what I want to stress today, according to the fact that we are talking about the role of memory and the role of semiotic methodology in relation to that, is how it is possible to change the meaning of the place using emotion that are textualized in practices and texts. Before entering the core, I would like to share with you some key questions that I pointed out for my work. What is nostalgia? How many meanings can nostalgia have in contemporary society? And what is the relationship between nostalgia and urban space? And also if we can define space for nostalgia, giving the space a sort of functional role in order that the space can create in a way, in a pragmatic way, the emotion itself. And then how many kinds of nostalgia escapes of space for nostalgia could exist. I studied two different case studies. The first one was Predappio, as I said, the birthplace of Benito Mussolini. The second one was Berlin in particular in relation to the memory of the DDR, the German Democratic Republic, that, as you maybe know, according to some touristic strategies today, there is a trend called nostalgia that is connected to the nostalgia of the former life, everyday life during the GDR. Today I have time just to try to answer 3 of these questions. The first one, and then what is space for nostalgia, presenting briefly the case studies. Starting with the first one, nostalgia, as you know, in semiotics, has been studied in different fields. In particular, the first one was Graciela, that in 1986 wrote this article, De la Nostalgie, in which he stressed in particular the fact that we can have nostalgia at temporal level. It's a passion of time, it's a passion of temporality, because there is always a disconnection or connection with an object of value, considering the fact that the present for the nostalgic person is a negative space and time, and the past, of course, on the contrary, is a positive and desirable space-time. Of course, during the years, the different scholars studied the role of nostalgia in this kind of practices, in this kind of academic field. In particular, what I want to stress, in a way, trying to connect with what Marisol was saying about indexicality, it is quite interesting if you can see that nostalgia has in a way a sort of tendency to indexicality, because there is always a connection with a specific object. We can have nostalgia alone in a way, but there is always a material thing that nostalgia try to attach itself. So as you can see here from the different definition, we can have promoted by an object, associated with an object, produced by thing, accompanied by an intense painful awareness. So there is always something that nostalgia needs to be present. In this research, of course, I studied this kind of tendency of indexicality to nostalgia, this possibility to create a sort of cause-effect reaction with the past and the emotion connected to it. But in particular, here you can see in this slide, there is the photograph of one of the main scholars in the debate of nostalgia, who is Svetlana Boym, who in her book, The Future of Nostalgia, said that we can have 2 different kinds of nostalgia. I think it's quite interesting if we are leaving the lexematic, as Graciela did, entering in the cultural, we can have this kind of distinction. I think it's quite important to underline this. We can have restorative nostalgia and reflexive nostalgia. The first one is quite connected to the idea that we can rebuild the lost home, the lost past, because in the present, a subject can feel a sort of gap between temporalities. The second one, the reflective nostalgia, is quite connected to the fact that there is ironic interpretation of what happened. So people can be nostalgic of different past periods, but they know that they can return a l'identique today. In particular, here I want to stress, because I'm discussing about the role of space and the role of emotion in this kind of field, we can have this kind of difference. For restorative nostalgia is a problem of spatialized time. So we need to have in the space today past temporality. For what concerns reflective nostalgia is the fact that we have to temporalized space. So we have a different relationship between temporality and spatiality that I think from semiotic point of view, because we studied a lot, especially if we use French semiotic, we are very aware of the difference between spatiality and temporality and the way in which they can communicate. So in this sense, I would like to put a difference between space for nostalgia and nostalgic space. In the first one, we can have a sort of reenactment of the past inside a specific space. So a sort of theater that fight against irreversibility of time, the ontological dimension of time that is impossible to come again. For what concerns nostalgic space, we have more the possibility to come back, like, for example, a place that we lived when we were young. So it's quite connected to personal memory. So this specific, I want to stress here the specific aspect connected to the four that is between space and nostalgia. So space for nostalgia, as I brought here, are those urban space in most cases they are changing their own meaning, which become the theater for practices out of time. These are not classical spaces for cultural memory, but they allow identities to indulge, in a way, console an emotional condition of past longing. So, in this sense, it's a space, but with a particular characteristic because it's temporality to be the protagonist. And considering this, I'm going quick on the theory because I want to show you the problematic case studies. And I'm saying problematic because Predappio is the birthplace of Benito Mussolini, as I said before, since 1956. 57, sorry, was a place for nostalgic and neo-fascist pilgrimages. So it becomes the theater for a particular kind of memory practices. But before showing you this kind of practices, I want to discuss with you what kind of space is Predappio, what kind of memory is presented there. Because if we consider the classical definition of space of memory, and a lot of scholars, like for example Patrizia Violi, Francesco Mazzucchelli, but also Federico Bellentani, said that there is always a connection in space of memory. There is always a connection with the event. So in a way, the space could be considered a sort of witness of what happened in the past, a witness of trauma. Let's think, for example, the classical one, which is Auschwitz, no? Where, of course, it's a space of trauma, but it's a space of trauma because there is a indexical connection with what happened in the past, because Auschwitz, of course, also testimony of what happened, because the trauma happened there. But Predappio is quite problematic because if you see the history of fascism, nothing happened there. There was no the March of Rome that created the let's say the fascist party as the only one in Italy happened in Rome, as I said. Mussolini declared the colonialist empire in Rome, declare war in Rome, create after the armistice a republic in Salò in north of Italy. He died in Dongo, in another little town, was killed by partisan in Dongo again. And in Milan was the famous Piazzale Loreto event. So as you can see, all the main moment of the life of Mussolini, but also if we can see the main moment of the life of the fascist party, did not happen in Predappio. So the important year that we have to consider is 1956, where was the year of the return of the body, the dead body of Benito Mussolini, in the communal cemetery of the little town. And from there, today, Predappio has different kind of spaces that are connected to the memory of Mussolini, which is the Casa Natale, which is probably the exact birthplace where Mussolini was born, the cemetery where there is the Benito Mussolini dead body, the souvenir shops, because it's quite interesting here. We consider the fact that there is also a touristic circuit behind this kind of practices, because if we consider, you can see here from the slide, Predappio is long just 4 kilometers, but there are 2 souvenir shops that are selling products that are explicitly connected to the fascist symbolism. And then there is the former fascist party town, and then the former Villa Mussolini, which is today a private, explicitly fascist museum. So I don't know. I think I don't have time anymore. Maybe later we can discuss together on the practices in Predappio. But what I want to show you is that, of course, when we talk about space of memory and when we talk about trauma, we have also to consider the translation of the past. But what happened when nostalgia enter in this kind of place. What happened when nostalgia tried to translate in a different way the past that is connected to trauma? Because of course, in the mainstream knowledge, Mussolini was a dictator, but in that specific place, 3 times every year, something of this narrative is changing, because Predap is considered a sort of black Bethlehem of the contemporary neo-fascist group. So with this, I think I don't have time anymore, because I'm the chair and I have to respect the time. And then I can leave the floor again to Marisol. And what I can do is to try. Are you there, Federico?
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you, Mario. I will try in this moment the share maybe is possible.
Yes, let's see. I'm trying to, so I'm downloading your.
Yeah.
Okay. Share screen. Let's try again, because I want to. Yes. Can you see? You did it? Marisol, can you see
yes,
your...
Yes, maybe.
I'm moving your slide. And then
you...
I did it, yes.
Okay.
So you just tell me when I have to move.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
No, you're welcome.
Entonces, retomando este tejido de memorias, me estoy dando cuenta muy relacionadas, puesto que también en mi caso se interpela el tema de la nostalgia, ¿no? De la saudade, de todas estas dimensiones de hilos de sensibilidad tan complejos. Yo les voy a compartir en este momento, si pudieses presentar la pantalla completa, querido Mario. Con el icono, exacto, gracias. Bueno, entonces este es un trabajo justamente de memorias de mujeres a través del dispositivo de la muñeca de trapo, que en las culturas negras, afrodescendientes, afrodiaspóricas y africanas es un elemento significativo de emocionalidad de la infancia, ¿no? Memoria de la infancia. Entonces, este es un emprendimiento tanto autosustentable para las mujeres del Valle del Chota, como para el norte de Ecuador, donde les comento esta práctica etnosemiótica, digamos, de inflexión sobre la vida, que interpela la creación de talleres de interseccionalidad cognitiva y en continuo. Generando la posibilidad de encontrar un archivo del imaginario, como lo estoy manejando ahorita, que recuerda la historia de vida de las mujeres a través de las muñecas negras, desbordando memorias. Entonces, seguimos, gracias. Aquí hay todo la próxima, gracias. Hay todo un trabajo de recordación también de lo que fue la maternidad vivida en los barcos esclavizadores en la época colonial, donde se conoce que por ser tantos meses que estaban ahí, las mujeres muchas veces parían en los barcos y rasgaban sus telas, con las cuales envolvían al bebé, o si no, cuando traían niñas a través de estos trapos, hacían muñequitas para calmar su llanto. Entonces, esto que aparece en algunos documentos del Archivo de India, sobre todo, ha inspirado a algunas mujeres emprendedoras en este campo De hecho, en Brasil también Lena Maris trabaja este tipo de expresión de muñeca de trapo, políticamente hablando y con todas las dimensiones simbólicas. Seguimos. Next. Gracias. Entonces, el trabajo implica entendiendo cada detalle, cómo ellas van construyendo la muñeca que va a representar a sus madres, abuelas, vecinas o alguna mujer que haya sido significativa en su infancia. Next, please. Entonces, un poquito lo estoy trabajando a través de esta idea de estética ritual cimarrona, donde se transversaliza la estética transfronteriza, de la cual ya hablé antes, la decolonialidad estética. Hay una interconexión cosmoperceptiva, ¿no? Donde se maneja mucho el discurso de la intuición, los sujetos multidimensionales de la realidad en este espacio también dialogan con las ancestras, y no solo presentes físicamente, sino presentes desde la semiótica de lo invisible, como lo llama Julieta Haidar, a esta expresión donde están presentes su línea materna, ¿no? Sus ancestras. Entonces, también está dimensionado esto. La interseccionalidad entre raza, clase, género, etnicidad, intersubjetivamente, intertransculturalmente, a través de todas estas prácticas semióticas discursivas. Transhumana ecológica, puesto que también hay un vínculo siempre con el todo de todos y las filosofías como el Ubuntu, esta palabra de interser, de intersiendo, desde la propuesta de Thich Nhat Hanh también la idea de intersiendo, estamos siendo en el otro está siendo en nosotros, y no solo entre seres humanos, sino entre todos los seres sintientes, la planta, el árbol, etcétera, el animal. La dimensión ética, política, erótica en equidad y armonía, ¿no? Desde diversas matrices, sujetos, valores, funciones, hechos estéticos. Toda la epistemología metafórica cognitiva, sobre todo desde el grupo Mu, ¿no? La articulación entre semiosis de memoria, acción y proyección, porque esto busca un cambio, una transformación en la vida, en el empoderamiento del cuerpo, sobre todo porque muchas de estas mujeres y en estos pueblos se da la maternidad adolescente, ¿no? Y también, por otro lado, interpela el derecho creativo, de que no es solamente el arte de galerías, el arte institucionalizado, es arte, sino también esta práctica, puesto que yo la manejo como una escultura blanda, ¿no? Es un modo también de construcción artística, estética. Seguimos, gracias. Next, please. Next. Aquí vemos a Jenny Espinosa, una de las productoras o imaginera popular, como me gusta a mí llamarle. Next, please. Estas muñequitas podemos ver, aparte del vestido tradicional, el uso del delantal, también el tema de la nostalgia, justamente. Por ejemplo, aquí vemos ojos con tristeza, que Jenny, su creadora, que las presenté en anterior diapositiva, destalló así cuando su hermana estaba sufriendo un proceso de cáncer. Y a ella le salió este tipo de detalle en el ojo. Next, please. Thank you. Aquí vemos también a las mujeres en su laburo cotidiana. Ellas son muchas veces vendedoras de frutas, de verduras en mercados, o si no, suben a los buses a vender. Y aquí vemos este trabajo elaborado por estas muñecas espejeando su vida. Next, please. Thank you. También, por supuesto, hemos hecho un espacio de trabajo con las deidades, sobre todo las deidades Yoruba, ¿no? Donde la fuerza creativa femenina, el empoderamiento como Yemanja, Oshun, es fundamental también para generar todo este tema de valoración positiva con sus vínculos históricos, como en el caso Yoruba. Next, please. Para la elaboración de las muñecas se usa la propia ropa de ellas o de alguien que sea significativo para ellas, hijas, madres, abuelas. Sacan muchos recuerdos de su infancia que tienen, o si no, de sus propias muñecas de cuando eran niñas y las comienzan a vestir. Next, please. Thank you. Por supuesto que con todo lo que ha pasado en estos tiempos, también las muñequitas han tomado partido político, como pueden ver en esta diapositiva. Thank you. Next, please. Aquí me voy a detener un poquito. Esta es un poco la propuesta semiótica que la manejo desde la metáfora muñeca en Ubuntu, es decir, muñeca conectada con la persona, pero también con las ancestras, también con la sociedad, las sociedades y no solo afrodescendientes. Entonces, en una especie de estética ritual en primeridad, que le llamaríamos una estética afórica desde la iconicidad de los imaginarios de la infancia. En una segundidad tendríamos la estética ritual metafórica desde la indexicalidad de las corporeidades y representaciones infantiles. Y en una terceridad, donde estaría la estética ritual metafórica desde el simbolismo de la memoria infantil, ¿no? Retomando, por supuesto, la propuesta de Peirce aquí, ¿no? Entonces, la muñeca funcionaría como un territorio diaspórico en cimarronía infantil. La cimarronía infantil sería justamente esta lucha, este contrapunteo, que retomando también la propuesta de Fernando Ortiz, el contrapunteo en este caso también tiene un punto, una puntada, un hilván, que también implica una lucha, una insurgencia, desde lo que también se conoce como la insurgencia de la ternura o el corazonar, que son propuestas desde la decolonialidad, desde epistemologías del sur. Next, please. Thank you. También hemos hecho altares en homenaje biográfico a mujeres lideresas que hayan sido violentadas, asesinadas o que han dejado legado en la historia de nuestros países y que no han sido visibilizadas debidamente. Next, please. Aquí, por ejemplo, tenemos un altar donde están nombres de las mujeres que fueron esclavizadas en él y que formaban parte del apoyo que tenía Manuel IASS-AIS en la lucha por la independencia, y que gracias a Jonatas, que escuchó que le iban a asesinar a Simón Bolívar en la casa de Cuenca, ella va y le comenta a su amita, entre comillas, ¿no? Como le llamaban, y ella le da un beso a Bolívar que le permite a él, semióticamente hablando, entender que le iban a pasar algo, y se sale por una puerta que no era la principal, y gracias a eso Jonatas salva a Simón Bolívar de ser asesinado en las luchas de la independencia. Cosas que se los toman como una especie solamente de anécdota, y que sin embargo tendrían que ser subrayadas, puesto que estas mujeres lucharon por la independencia de nuestros países también. Thank you. Next. Aquí tenemos un altar de deidades afro-yorubás, ¿no? Y que, sin embargo, la propuesta que ellas hicieron fue hacerlas todas las deidades como muñecas, es decir, que tenemos a un Changó en femenino, que tenemos a un Eleguá en femenino. Aquí podemos ver en este altar, ¿no? Abriendo el altar, el Eleguá, pero es una muñeca vestida de Eleguá. Entonces, son modos también que han sido vinculados y para poder empoderarles desde propuestas de derechos humanos, derechos de salud reproductiva, derechos en contra de la violencia a las mujeres, a la discriminación, que todavía es un elemento lamentablemente vívido en nuestras culturas latinoamericanas y en el mundo en general. Thank you. Next. Ya mismo terminamos. Next. Aquí están ellas, el colectivo con el que ahorita estoy trabajando. Next, please. Aquí está el altar en honor a Berta Cáceres, una de las mujeres lideresas que luchó por el cuidado del agua en su pueblo, en Honduras. Y ella dice, por ejemplo, una frase significativa dentro del campo de la infancia, ¿no? De los ríos somos custodios ancestrales del pueblo lenca, resguardados además por los espíritus de las niñas, que nos enseñan a dar la vida de múltiples formas por la defensa de la humanidad y este planeta. Next, please. Aquí tenemos el altar que lo pudimos hacer gracias a mi estancia en mi postdoctorado en UC Berkeley, en Gender and Women Studies, donde cuando coincidió que se dio este asesinato a Marielle Franco, la lideresa de las favelas de Brasil, el grupo de compañeros brasileños y yo con este tema, ellos de hecho me pidieron que hagamos un altar en homenaje a ella, y aquí tenemos esta representación. Thank you. Creo que es la última, o no, creo que hay una más. Next, please. Esta fue también otro de los altares que se presentó en UC Berkeley, en honor a Sarah Bartman, ¿no? Que, como conocen, la primera mujer colcoy que estuvo en Europa en el siglo XVIII y que fue tratada, ahora sí que con violencia institucional por la ciencia, ya que fue vista como parte de un gabinete, ¿no? de esa época. Entonces, así, estos son algunos ejemplos de los que hemos hecho. Thank you very much. Solo para terminar, esta práctica semiótico-discursiva transcultural, como ven, permite combinar este trabajo de inflexión con interseccionalidades, con sujetos diversos de raza, clase, etnicidad, en contextos de continuo, y también nos permite encontrar la disputa de sentido que se da en ese punteo interseccional de género, de diferentes, desde los diferentes lugares enunciativos metafóricos complejos. Las muñecas de trapo cimarronean lo que María Lugones denominó el sistema moderno colonial de género a través del ejercicio del derecho a imaginar, que cuestiona críticamente representaciones normalizadas, las que interdictan la sexualidad y a veces naturalizan lo que, por ejemplo, Rita Segato llama las pedagogías de la crueldad. Es decir, que el reto a través de este tipo de insurgencia de la ternura es desencajar el patrón estético hegemónico blanco mestizo, reconstruyendo los cuerpos antes discriminados desde una estética de la belleza negra. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much. No se te escucha, Mario.
I'm sorry. I said thank you very much for your thought-provoking presentation. I have many questions, but I'd like to say if in the chat there are some questions for us, and then I have just one comment, let's say, for you. And yes, there is one question. There is Davide Rossi who said, great Fede. I agree with him. And then there is Christian Guerra who said in Italian, I'm reading in Italian, grazie al presentatore, un commento più che una domanda, eppure per i partecipanti che idealizzano i monumenti di Mussolini viene considerato come spazi di memoria per il loro interesse, però sono legittimi questi spazi anche se la loro storia ne dovrebbe considerare nostalgia? Grazie. Rispondo in italiano. Creo que Marisol, tú me entiendes si yo hablo en italiano.
Sì.
Sì, rispondo alla domanda di Christian nei commenti, che è assolutamente interessante, riguarda la questione della prospettiva, no? Nel senso, noi da analisti semiotici ci mettiamo in una posizione che è la nostra posizionalità antifascista, e quindi, diciamo, riusciamo a capire la logica della nostalgia perché partiamo ovviamente da una posizionalità che va riconosciuta e che è legittima, dato appunto l'operato di Benito Mussolini, che è stata una dittatura e va riconosciuta come tale. Quindi su questo è necessario essere chiari. È assolutamente vero che per loro quello non è uno spazio della nostalgia, per loro quello è uno spazio della memoria che si trasforma in nostalgia nella misura in cui loro però rimpiangono la politica, il corpo, ci sono diversi livelli in realtà, il santo anche, Mussolini, e quindi lo desiderano indietro. Per loro è più stratificato e sia spazio della memoria celebrativa, ma può essere anche spazio della nostalgia quando riconoscono il sentimento di mancanza. And I have just one question for you, and then I think we are out of time. Thank you very much, Marisol. Really, was really rich presentation, and I really liked what you said about derecho creativo. I think it's important also because you said that there is always an inter and trans perspective, no? There is inter and trans gender perspective. So in relation to the fact that we have to avoid the heteronormative white perspective on things. And with this derecho creativo that I really like as category, we should overcome this classical idea that we have to interpret the world with white and maybe European perspective, no? And it's quite interesting also what you said about nostalgia, for example, no? Because I showed on my presentation the fact that nostalgia is always connected to object. And you said in a different way the same thing, because with this kind of dolls, they are connecting memories with objects. So the object is the externalization of a more complex memory system. And I think, and it's not just a translation, you know, it's not just memory becoming text, becoming object. It's not just a simple translation, but what you are adding, the fact that you are saying that there is creativity, I think it's the key for a new and non-heteronormative perspective, I think. Well, it was just a comment, because I was really happy to hear your presentation. It was amazing.
Thank you very much, Mario. Yes, I also think this empower of creative right is very important because all have it, all have of ethnic culture, all have this right, and we need use and we need you practice in all things that we made, quotidian or ritual, sacred, no, different kinds, all things, and we need use.
And another thing that I think, sorry, I can't hear you well because maybe you have some problem with your connection. What you said, the last sentence, la última frase.
I think that we empowered it, the creative right. We can to transcending the sense, negative sense, to a new third place, the third place. Yes, un nuevo espacio, un tercer espacio. With the resilience, no, with the creative, the new things, different to diferente al pasado, diferente a la hora, pero es un nuevo espacio. Eso creo que es este derecho creativo de todos y todas en todas las culturas, ¿no?
And another thing, and then we have really to go. We can talk about it all day long because it's quite interesting. But just another thing, the importance of transnationality also, no? Because you said that, of course, they are in different parts of the world. They are doing the same practices. So in USA, in Latin America, maybe Europe. So this idea that there is a sort of shared code that is not just in a simple country, just in one country, but is, you know, transnational. Here again, there is the prefix trans in relation to gender, in relation to nations, in relation to culture, that I think it's very interesting also in our reflection on memory, you know, because we have to overcome also in the debate of memory the idea that there is just one code to interpret the past. There is not just one way to say something about what happened. No, we have to consider, of course, the culture, but also we have to, in a way, create a sort of this transnational and transcultural perspective, not just for comparing, but to understand better both, I think, both or all the parts that are involved. Okay, if there are no more questions, there is Organización Campus who said, atento saludo desde la Organización Campus, estaremos recogiendo sus inquietudes a través del siguiente link. Está un link on the comments section. There is a link by Organization Campus, who is sharing now also on our screen. And I think we are out of time. Federico left because of another work appointment, so he's sorry, but he said thank you also to you for your presentation and for this discussion. And yes, thank you very much again to Neyla Pardo and all the Semiotic staff organization for this very inspiring and interesting meeting. And I hope that we can continue our discussion on memory and semiotics. Thank you very much, Marisol. Thank you, Federico. And see you soon. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Mario. Muchísimas gracias, Mario, por tu dirección en esta mesa, y sobre todo lo que comentas, ¿no? De generar estos espacios para conocer y coincidir, como en este caso, ¿no? Con estas reflexiones desde una semiótica tan sensible como es lo de la nostalgia. Así que un gusto conocerte y esperamos comentarios de la gente que pueda
es lo mismo para mí. Lo mismo para mí.
Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias a todos y todas. Hola.
Thank you.